stars of animation are shining. It's time to stay tuned. And now, here's your host, Phil Machi.
Hey everyone, welcome to Stay Tuned. Tonight's special guest is Gary K. Wolfe. Few animated films have had anywhere near the impact of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Author Gary K. Wolfe was already making a name for himself as a science fiction writer when he released Who Censored Roger Rabbit back in 1981. That book inspired a groundbreaking live-action animated hybrid film, which was the result of an unprecedented collaboration between Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis, and Walt Disney Pictures. While at the time of this recording, no sequel has ever been produced, 3 gorgeous short cartoons did arrive in theaters after the 1988 Roger Rabbit film. We're about to talk with the father of Toon Town himself in just a few moments. But first, this. Gary K. Wolfe, welcome to Stay Tuned.
Hey, it's good to be here. My great pleasure. At this point in my career, I am just happy that anybody remembers or even knows who I am.
Well, yeah, we all, as artists, we all want to be remembered, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's a little more than appropriate, I think, to have the author of all things Toon Town join me on Stay Tuned.
Yeah, because, without me, I don't know what you would have called your program.
I don't know either. I would have called it Stay Listening.
Stay Goofy or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Stay Goofy. I like that.
Yeah.
You've obviously written Who Censored Roger Rabbit, but, since then, there have been 2 additional stories in that series. So what is it about Toontown that keeps bringing you back?
Well, when I wrote the first one, when I wrote Who Censored Roger Rabbit, I never had any intention of ever doing a sequel. It was going to be a one-off. And to those of you who read it, and I encourage everybody to read it, I encourage people to go to my website, buy in bulk, and read the book. It has certain things that go on in that book that kind of make it very difficult for there to even be a sequel. And I won't give away the surprise, but you can read the book and see for yourself. I really never expected that it would be the world-changing cult novel that it eventually became, that it would usher in a whole new era of animation, that people would really relate to Toontown and to Toons, and there was a big groundswell for me to do a sequel. And I toyed with it for a while, and after a couple of years, I finally decided, I'll do a sequel. So I did the sequel novel, and that one was tremendously well reviewed and well accepted. Disney bought that one for the movie that was supposedly going to be the second movie, if there ever was a second movie. And then I started writing other things. Years later, I'd written a novel, and a straight science fiction novel. I still consider myself to be a kind of a dual purpose author. I'm a science fiction writer, and I'm also a whatever you call Toontown writer. I don't call it fantasy. I don't call it a children's book, whatever it is, that's what I am. And I had gone back to writing science fiction novels, and I was getting ready to publish one. And then this being the digital age, my publisher said to me, hey, you should start doing a blog. And I'd never done a blog before. I said, what goes in it? And she said, well, you should have something in it every day that people will want to come and read, so that people will go to your blog every day. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I've got this almost completed Roger Rabbit novel that I did about 12 years ago. How about if I just publish a chapter of that every day? And she said to me, you have an unpublished Roger Rabbit novel? I said, yeah, I kind of wrote it just as a joke, as a lark, and, never published it. I went on to write other things. And she said, well, instead of putting that in the blog, why don't we publish that?
Yeah.
And it seemed like a good idea to me. So that is the Toontown novel series. There's Who Censored Roger Rabbit, which was first. There's Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, where we standardized on the 5-piece stutter, which was second. And then there's Who Whacked Roger Rabbit, which was actually written second but published third. And, of the three, Who Censored Roger Rabbit is a work of towering genius. It's just an incredible, incredible novel. Who Whacked Roger Rabbit, because it came on the heels of Who Censored, is at that level. I mean, it's really amazing. Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, pretty good. And, certainly of interest to anybody who, wants a good laugh and loves Toon Town, loves Roger Rabbit. But I would rank them the first one, the third one, and the second one in order of, I think, creativity and just, interest to people who like Roger Rabbit.
And for those of us, who are all into the pictures, these are standard novels, not graphic novels, right?
Standard novels, yeah, standard novels. And I'll give you just a little hint of things to come, but I am currently working on a fourth Toon Town novel, and I've never told anybody about that, so you have kind of an exclusive here.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to focus on some different characters. Roger and Jessica will be in it. Eddie has a major role, but not as major as he did in the first three. It focuses on the turmoils of other characters and their relationships with humans. Yeah.
But being that you're also a science fiction writer, why do you keep coming back to Toon Town?
Oh, I love Toon Town. Toon Town for me is the most pleasurable kind of writing I can do, and also the most difficult.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it takes me to write a science fiction novel takes me about a year. And to write a Toon Town novel takes me, oh my gosh, anywhere from 3 to 5 years, because it is just so difficult to get everything right. And in order to write a Toon Town novel, you have to go live in Toon Town. You have to go into Toon Town every day and look around and see what's going on. And you come up with, different scenarios, different things that would happen in Toon Town that wouldn't happen in the real world. Then you have to relate them to the story and relate them to the human characters. And it's just a really, really difficult kind of writing. It's hard. It's painful at times.
I like how you phrase that. I like how you're saying to go live in Toon Town, because, the concept of Toon Town speaks to the imaginative child in all of us, I think. And if you, Gary, could spend the day with a cartoon character in Toon Town, is there one in particular that you would choose?
Well, I'd choose Roger. I think he'd be my first choice.
Yeah.
I've always been a Donald Duck fan.
Oh, yeah.
I think that me and Roger and Donald could really have a great time hanging around, Goofy's bar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, look at that! Does anybody understand what this duck is saying? I've worked with a lot of wisecrackers, but you are despicable. This is the last time I work with someone with a speech impediment. This means war.
My only lament of that movie was that we didn't get to hang out in Toon Town more.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, Toon Town was kind of an aside in that movie. It was mostly set in L.A.
Right.
And, Toon Town was kind of like the big McGill at the end, the big reveal where we went into Toon Town.
Yeah.
If we were going to do a sequel, I think we would spend more time in Toon Town. And, there've been all kinds of ideas kicked around for sequels and, including spending more time in Toon Town. But I'll tell you one thing, because this just occurred to me very recently, that they just brought out Who Censored Roger Rabbit as an audiobook. And this was unheard of for a major company, Tantor Media, with one of the biggies, to bring out a book that was written in 1980 for the first time as an audiobook. I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And so they sent me an audio copy, and I've been listening to it. And as I'm listening to it, I'm laughing out loud. But the big thing that occurs to me while I'm listening to this thing is the writing is too good. I am not capable of that kind of writing. And I keep wondering, well, who actually wrote this? Because I couldn't sit down and write it. And then I realized that the way that I write Toon Town novels is such that I revise every page a minimum of 1,000 times. And that's not an exaggeration. I actually rewrite every page at least 1,000 times. And I keep making it better and keep making it better and keep making it better and funnier until there comes a time when it is so funny and so much better that it is beyond anything that I could just sit down and write.
It's refined.
Yeah, it's refined. And I liken it to building a table if you're a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you start out with a tree and you cut that tree down and then you plane it and it's all rough and then you kind of put it together and then you smooth it off with a plane and then you smooth it off with sandpaper and then you smooth it off with finer sandpaper and it gets finer and finer and finer and finer until pretty soon it's as glossy as a mirror.
So who was it that wrote that piece that you said you couldn't have written?
Well, I have no idea. I was inhabited by the spirits of writers long gone. I have no idea. I'm assuming it had to be me.
So after you've written this many novels, you're still having these moments of, man, I couldn't have written something as good as that. You still have these wavering confidence moments.
Oh, it's not. I don't doubt my abilities, and I don't doubt that I can write a pretty good novel. It's just that after I write something and then years later go back and read it,
right,
can't remember writing it because in a sense, any given page I wrote over the course of sometimes 3 years.
Sure.
So I cannot remember sitting down and writing a specific sentence because I wrote that sentence over such a long period of time.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, I've talked to a lot of other writers, and I always ask writers, hey, how do you write? And I've talked to writers who say, oh, you know, I turn out 6,000 pages a day. And I mean, that's a novel in 10 days.
Yeah.
And I say, well, how much do you revise? You say, oh, I never revise. You know, I revise in my head, and what I put down is just golden.
It's different for everybody. Everyone's process is different. Yeah.
It's different for everybody. And I can't do that.
Yeah, I don't write that way either, but I will tell you that I go over things so many times in my head that by the time I finally sit down to write something, it does start to flow pretty well because I've already been mulling it over so often.
Yeah, now I can do that with my science fiction writing.
Okay.
I don't write my science fiction novels 1,000 times, you know, every page 1,000 times. I don't do that. I don't have to.
Interesting. Okay.
It's simpler concepts, and it's, you know, science fiction. It's a time that doesn't exist, either present or, you know, future usually.
Okay.
I don't write a whole lot of outer space stuff, but I have, and I still will, and I do. But that kind of stuff doesn't require the mental gyrations that I need to do when I go into Toon Town.
Interesting.
You know, where the people are kind of metaphysical beings. You know, I mean, the creatures can do all kinds of things. I mean, they can squish themselves, and they can get hit on the head with an anvil, and they can talk in word balloons, and they can do all kinds of
that is something interesting about your book, is that the characters, unlike the movie Roger Rabbit, the word balloons actually appeared above their heads, and you'd have to deal with that as it physically would enter the atmosphere, the room, right? Yeah,
exactly. That was one of the things that I had the most fun with. In the censored novel, they can suppress their word balloons and talk normally. Jessica suppresses her word balloons because they're not sexy enough. So she talks in, you know, Kathleen Turner's voice or whoever. But everybody else talks in word balloons. And the word balloons are actually characters in and of themselves. They do things. You know, if you shoot somebody with a Toon gun, it produces a bang balloon. And you can pick up that bang balloon and analyze it and figure out what caliber the gun was that fired it. And then when you find the gun, you can fire the gun and it'll produce another bang balloon and the two will match. And there's a character in the novel who is shot and he collapses over a railing as he's dying, and he produces a word balloon just before he dies, and the word balloon goes over the railing and he falls over it. So they take his body off the railing and pick up the word balloon, and the word balloon looks like kind of a taco shell because it's kind of dried and brittle, and you have to be careful it doesn't crack and you read it. And this is just one scene, and there was a piano being played, and the reason why the door didn't lock after the guy was killed was because the music, as it was scrolling out of the piano, wrapped itself around the doorknob and held the door open. You cut that music into 8x10 sheets, and that's where sheet music comes from.
Oh, fun. That reminds me a lot of Felix the Cat jokes. That's what that reminds me of. A lot of those early.
Funny you should mention Felix the Cat, because one of Disney's early tries at making this into a movie, and I've got to be honest with you, I did not think this was a filmable book. I did not think that anybody could turn this into a movie, because it was so creative visually and required so much of a reader's imagination that I just didn't think it could be visualized.
Sure.
But one of their early takes on it was to do it with word balloons.
Oh, okay.
But it became obvious really early on that it became a silent movie. You know, the character put up a word balloon, you read the word balloon. Boom,
which works great for a novel, right? It works great for a novel, but for a visual medium.
Not so hot for a movie. So they wanted to have at least an homage to my word balloons. And so they had a scene in the movie where Marvin Acme was being buried.
Okay.
And his coffin was being carried by Goofy and a bunch of other cartoon characters. And as they were carrying his coffin, they all started laughing. And all the spectators started laughing. And they carried the coffin past Felix the Cat, who, of course, never spoke. And Felix the Cat put up a word balloon that said sob. And it turned to tears and then got his head and shoulders all wet, and they passed on. And that was the homage to my word balloons. Oh. Beautiful, beautiful scene. But the movie ran, they thought, too long. They really didn't know if this was going to be an adult movie or a children's movie. And the rule of thumb is that a children's movie can't be longer than an hour and a half. So they cut it to bring it closer to an hour and a half, and they cut that scene. So my word balloon wound up on the cutting room floor.
Did you end up seeing the scene at some point?
I saw it in mock-up, and I saw drawings. I don't think they ever actually animated it.
Oh, okay.
But they were intending to.
Lots more with Gary K. Wolf after this. We're back with Gary K. Wolf discussing his Toon Town novel series.
The first novel, great novel, well-reviewed, but maybe read by 36 people, of which 10 of them were my mother and my aunts, right? The movie, seen by, at last counting, it's grossed more than $1 billion. So maybe 1/10 of a billion people have seen the movie. So to them, their concept of Toon Town and Roger Rabbit is the movie, not the book. So when I wrote the sequel novel, I had to decide, was I going to be true to the original concept of the first book, or true to the concept changed by Disney for the movie?
Yeah.
I kind of did a hybrid. The nature of the story is very adult, just like the first book was. They still talk in word balloons. They now, all of them talk normally at some point in time, but mostly still word balloons. And it was a hybrid. I think pretty successful. The third novel, because it was written probably maybe even before the movie came out, the third novel is very close in tone and structure to the first novel. So they're still talking word balloons, still working for newspaper syndicates, although I think I have a couple of them now working for cartoons too. But that was a creative problem for me, yeah.
All this talk about word balloons and syndicates is hearkening me back to my roots, because I'm a comic strip lover at heart.
Cigars, cigarettes, Eddie Valiant.
Betty?
Long time no see.
What are you doing here?
Work's been kind of slow since cartoons went to color. But I still got it, Eddie. Boop, boop, be-doo.
Yeah, you still got it.
I like that you drew some inspiration from the Sunday Funnies.
In reading and listening to the new audiobook, I realize how many references there are to comic strips, comic books, and comic characters from my youth, from the 40s, 50s. And I sometimes wonder if younger people will get the references, will get the joke.
Well, let me know here. Which of those strips were the most influential for you?
Well, I like Prince Valiant.
Okay.
Because he was tall, which I will never be. He was handsome, which I will never be. And he had a drop-dead gorgeous girlfriend who wore really alluring clothing, Princess Alita, very alluring clothing. I loved Buck Rogers and for pretty much the same reason. I think it was Dale Arden used to wear really revealing stuff. I was big on Terry and the Pirates. I liked action stuff.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
I liked the comic books and the comic strips that had a lot of action.
What about Dick Tracy?
I love Dick Tracy. Oh, I love Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
And I used to read Dick Tracy and say, oh my God, a wrist radio. That would be so cool to have.
and now we have them basically.
Now I've got my Apple Watch.
Yeah.
I've got it all.
The future is here.
Yeah. In comic books, I was mostly a DC guy.
Hey, me too.
I liked Superman. I liked Batman. Wonder Woman was one of my favorites. I was too early for the Marvel comics. They came along after I did. I also liked the war comics, and I read a lot of horror comics.
You mentioned a second ago about an audiobook, and so I was going to ask you, this is an audiobook based on the original novel, Who Censored Roger Rabbit, and are the people who do the vocalizations in this novel, are they trying to sound like the movie?
One guy. It's an audiobook. So it's just one guy reading the book, and he does I think a good job of differentiating the characters, but no, he's not trying to duplicate Charlie Fleischer. I mean, who could duplicate Charlie Fleischer?
Sure. Of
course, as a guy, he's capable of duplicating Kathleen Turner, but he does a good job. I listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Okay.
I run every day, and when I'm doing that, I always listen to audiobooks. So I go through a lot of audiobooks. And this guy is way above average in differentiating characters and bringing emotion and pathos and the correct perspective to each character's point of view. He's got Eddie Valiant down cold. It took me a minute to get into his characterization of Roger because, to me, Charlie Fleischer is and always will be Roger Rabbit. And
sure.
Kathleen Turner is and always will be Jessica.
Yeah.
But once you get past that initial, whoa, this is different, it's pretty good. And
okay,
I'm enjoying it. It is actually the first time that I have ever heard the novel read out loud.
Oh, wow.
And I guess looking back on it, there's no reason for me to ever have heard the novel read out loud.
Well,
nobody's going to read it to me.
Whenever I write stuff, I do read it out loud to see if it sounds differently than the way it reads on the page, because I find that you get a different sense of verbiage when you do that.
I should try that because I never have, and sounds like a really good idea.
Well, thanks.
Never done.
Yeah, well, it's just something that, for me it happened because I was writing stuff that rhymes, and I wanted to get the meter right. And I found that when I would read it out loud, I'm like, wow, I'm starting to notice that some of these words, they don't work when they're spoken like they do when you're seeing them. And so that got me thinking differently about what words I was choosing.
So when I read it out loud, it sounds much better than if I read it in the shower where it gets wetter.
Yes, that's perfect. I love that.
You don't want to get your old pal Ransom in trouble, do ya? I know! Ta-da! Look! It's a bright, shiny rattle! Jason! Somebody call 911! Call 911!
Hey, so why do you think we haven't seen at least a few more Roger Rabbit short cartoons? I know movies are kind of touch and go, but at least some more of the shorts.
The shorts cost $12 million a piece.
Oh, okay.
And, enough said. No.
Yeah, that's probably what it is.
And there was one more Roger short that was storyboarded, A Hair in My Soup.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that never got done.
Oh, see, that kind of storyboard stuff, they should be throwing that on the Blu-ray. They should be letting us see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the reason is those shorts cost so much money. And I guess the bean counters said that they more than paid for themselves by bringing people into movies that they would not have otherwise gone to see.
Man, can you imagine if nowadays, if they made that short and put it in front of movies right now, how amazing that would be?
That would be amazing. Yeah. They put, I think it was Tummy Trouble in front of A Far Off Place. And I don't think there are 3 people in the world that would have gone to see A Far Off Place if it hadn't been for Tummy Trouble. And Roller Coaster, I believe, was in front of Dick Tracy.
Oh, yeah.
Disney actually had to battle for that one because Warren Beatty doesn't like cartoons. I mean, go figure.
What?
Another reason not to like Warren
Warren
Beatty.
Beatty doesn't like cartoons?
Yeah.
What?
And didn't want a cartoon in front of his movie. So anyway, I think there's still a market for cartoons. In front
Oh
of
my
movies.
gosh, of course there is, yes.
Come on, Eddie, where's your sense of humor?
Is he always this funny, or only on days when he's wanted for murder?
Listen, my philosophy is this. If you don't have a good sense of humor, you're better off dead.
The whole Roger Rabbit franchise came around initially at exactly the right time. And after the movie, it became exactly the wrong time because a lot of political things happened at Disney. Jeff Katzenberg, who I give a lot of credit for getting the movie produced, he left Disney, and Spielberg, wanted to do his own projects. So Spielberg went off and did his own animation studio, Amblimation. And then the whole Pixar thing came around.
Sure.
Pixar people wanted to do Pixar characters, and they wanted to do 3D digital animation. Roger just didn't fit in there.
So the timing, it was just all timing.
It was all timing. It was all timing on the first one. They needed Roger Rabbit when Roger Rabbit came out because they were in danger of becoming a second-rate movie production studio.
Yeah.
And they needed Roger to vault them back up into the world-class arena of movie production houses. Then the timing was such that Roger just didn't fit into that. So they got rid of all the 2D animators and brought in all 3D animators.
You know what's funny is I don't think of him as a Disney character, though. I really don't. I've never really thought of him like that.
Dude,
Roger. For some reason, he seems like I know it was a Disney production, but it was also Zemeckis and it was also Spielberg. It was this amalgamation, and I think because that movie has the characters from the Looney Tunes, it has Betty Boop,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? You got all these characters living together. I always felt like he was just sort of in this different time.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if it had been Warner Brothers who made this instead of Disney.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think Roger is probably closer to a Warner Brothers Tex Avery character than he is to
Yeah, is that why you chose a rabbit? What made you go with, because there's so many cartoon cats and mice out there.
Well, yeah, I chose a rabbit. I wanted something that was kind of Disney-esque,
Okay.
but also kind of Warner Brothers. I wanted Roger to be a character that was basically a good-hearted kind of guy who would help you out, have your back. But I also wanted him to be a little mischievous. I wanted him to be a kind of a combination of Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny. Mickey Mouse will tell you what he's going to do. Straight Arrow will go and do it. And Bugs will tell you what he's going to do. Crooked Arrow, they'll put a stick of dynamite down your pants. So I wanted Roger to be a combination, and I looked at kind of Disney stable, and I wanted to have a character. I wanted to create characters that people would believe existed.
Hmm.
And so I looked at Disney stable, and they didn't have a really superstar rabbit. So I said, a rabbit would be good. I made him brown instead of the color he is now, and they thought he would be easier to animate as a white rabbit rather than a brown rabbit. So I didn't have a problem with that.
You've got the wrong idea about me, Mr. Valiant. I'm a pawn in this, just like Roger. Can you help me find him? Just name your price, and I'll pay it.
Yeah, I bet you would. You gotta have the rabbit to make the scam work.
No, I love my husband. You've got me all wrong. You don't know how hard it is being a woman looking the way I do.
Yeah, well, you don't know how hard it is being a man looking at a woman looking the way you do.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
I based Jessica, of course, on Tex Avery's Red Hot Riding Hood.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she's definitely Red Hot Riding Hood.
Yeah.
With touches of Veronica Lake and Ava Gardner.
Mae West.
And Mae West, yeah, and Betty Grable. But my most successful character is actually Baby Herman. And I based him on a number of kind of adult cartoon babies that were around in the 40s and early 50s. There was Baby Huey, and there was just a lot of them. And he was so successful that when I gave the novel to my agent said, "Oh," he said, "you can't use this character." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, he's not your character." I said, "Yeah, he is. I made him up." And he said, No. I've seen Baby Herman before. He's somebody else's character." I said, "No, trust me on this. I really made him up." So he's probably the most successful. But Roger as a Disney character, you're right. He doesn't have a true Disney persona.
Yeah.
He's more Warner Brothers, a little goofier, a little wilder.
Yeah. A little bit Clampett.
Yeah. Jessica certainly is more Warner Brothers than Disney. Yeah.
Very Tex Avery.
Yeah, and maybe that had something to do with why you haven't seen a Roger 2. The project has been on a roller coaster. There was a period of time when I said, oh, it's never going to happen. And there was a period of time 10 years ago when I said, wow, it's going to happen. Now, I don't know what to tell you. Your guess is as good as mine.
Well, it definitely spawned off other inspired by films like Cool World and Space Jam, and but I don't think anything's ever really quite hit the success that Roger has.
And I understand they're making Space Jam 2.
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Space
they
Jam
are.
2, give me a break.
I know they're trying.
I wonder who he really was.
I'll tell you one thing, Doc. He weren't no rabbit. Or a duck.
Or a dog.
Or a little wooden boy.
Or a sheep.
Or a woodpecker.
Or a pussy.
Were there cameos in the original, in any of the 3 books? Do you have cameos? Does Mickey Mouse pop in here and there?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, sure. You can get away with it as satire and, First Amendment rights. You can use that sort of stuff as long as you don't defame them or, make Mickey a sex-crazed mouse. As long as you treat them fairly, you can get away with it. And yeah, I mean, Donald and Mickey and all the Disney characters, all the Warner Brothers characters, they're all in there.
Oh, that's great.
And of course, all the cartoon characters and comic strip characters are in there too. Yeah.
You got Popeye in there as well?
I don't think Popeye, but Olive Oil does make an appearance in the next one.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up, Doc? Jumping without a parachute? Kinda dangerous, ain't it?
Yeah, you can get killed.
You guys got a spare?
Bugs does.
Yeah?
Yeah, but I don't think you want it.
I do. Give it to me.
Gee, better let him have it, Bugs.
Okay, Doc. Whatever you say. Here's the spare.
Thank you. Ah, no! Ah!
Poor fella.
Yeah, ain't I a stinker?
So on your website, I've noticed there was a book that you wrote years ago that's making a resurgence now, right, as a comic book.
Killer Bowl.
Killer Bowl.
Yes. When I go to science fiction conventions as opposed to Disney conventions, I am known as the guy that wrote Killer Bowl. That was my very first novel. And, in those days, I was really cranking them out because, sports, football, real guy stuff. I think it took me 9 months to write that one. And very, very successful novel. Interesting concept in the writing of it. I liked it a lot. And a lot of people loved it. And I still get maybe 30 or 40 fan letters a month on Killer Bowl, which was written in 1976.
Wow.
Yeah, 1976. And it's been hovering around as a possible movie for a long time. And now we're doing a Killer Bowl comic book. And this is just amazing because we've got an English writer who's really famous in the comic book circles, Giancarlo. And he's done the cover and 12 pages. And we're actually going to go Kickstart.
Okay.
And there's going to be a whole lot of good stuff that we're going to give away for donations, like a signed original art from the comic book. I'm going to autograph a bunch of original Killer Bowl novels.
Very cool.
Good stuff. Yeah,
that's
it's
great.
Really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Gary, really having you here today has been really a treat because, there are certain milestones in film and we can look back over the last, 30, 40, 50 years and see points in time where you can notice there is some piece of media that transforms whatever comes after it. I mean, I think everything does that to a point, but some pieces more than others. And so it's really a great honor to have you here because I believe your story is one of those works that has done that.
Well, I'm touched by that, and I'm proud to have done it. And when I die, on my tombstone it says Gary K. Wolf, he created Toon Town and Roger Rabbit. I mean, that'll be enough.
Well, maybe you should have a tombstone instead.
I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. It was just too awful.
I know.
But oddly appropriate.
That's what my tombstones is going to say. It's really awful, but oddly appropriate. That's what it's going to say. There needs to at least be some kind of a wolf character somewhere named Gary, I think, in one of your books. Gary Wolf.
Well, actually, I'm doing a 12-episode animated series on TV.
Are you?
Set in a jazz club. I don't think I've talked about this either, but it's set in a jazz club in Toon Town. It's about a detective who is investigating a murder of which he's accused, and he is a cartoon wolf.
Oh, great.
So I based him, well, not on me, because he's he's got a lot hairier beard than I do. But,
I imagine he's got a hairier entire body.
Body.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you again, Gary. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time.
Sure, my pleasure. Hey, and if anybody's interested, you can go to my website, www.garywolf.com. You can find out all things wolf.
Yeah.
You can buy the new audiobook.
The audiobook's there. The
audiobook's
comic book will be there, right?
Yep, comic book will be there, everything.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
That was the Toon chorus singing Smile Darnya Smile in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The film's score was composed by James Horner, who, in collaboration with Bruce Broughton, also wrote the music for the 3 produced Roger Rabbit short cartoons. All that music and so much more was released on a 3-CD set in early 2018 from Entrada Records. That is all the time we have for this episode. Special thanks go out once again to Gary K. Wolf for joining us here on the show. As always, thank you so much for listening in at home. If you love Stay Tuned, you're invited to go behind the podcast by visiting patreon.com/Phil Machi. Subscribing there will get you access to cool rewards like exclusive interview outtakes, my cartoon reviews, and monthly video updates. While you're at it, check out my original comic books at retailsunshine.com. And be sure to say hi to me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook under the handles of both Retail Sunshine and Phil Machi. Don't forget to visit the ever-growing Stay Tuned community on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Stay Tuners. I've been Phil Machi, you've been a wonderful audience, and until next time, keep those eyeballs peeled, those ears open, smile darnya smile, and be sure to stay tuned.